February 16, 1943. Midnight. 10,000 feet above the frozen expanse of Hardangervidda Plateau, Norway. The Halifax bomber's engines roar like distant thunder, vibrating through the fuselage as 6 Norwegian Commandos huddle in the dim red light of the jump bay. Wind howls through the open hatch, whipping snowflakes into a frenzy that stings exposed skin like needles. Second Lieutenant Joachim Ronneberg, 23, grips his parachute straps, his breath fogging the air. Heart pounding, he stares into the black void below, endless white wilderness under a storm-lashed sky. No turning back now. The green light flashes. Go, shouts the RAF dispatcher. Ronneberg leaps first, plunging into the abyss. The rush of Arctic air slams him, twisting his body as the parachute cracks open with a jolt. Below, the plateau rushes up, a ghostly sea of snowdrifts and jagged rocks blurred by the blizzard. He hits hard, knees buckling into powder that swallows him waist-deep. Gasping, he unclips, buries the chute under frantic scoops of snow. The cold seeps through his white camouflage suit, burning his fingers as he signals with a flashlight, brief, coded bursts piercing the gale. One by one, the others land. Sergeant Birger Stromsheim, steady as a rock at 31, skis clattering beside him. Second Lieutenant Knut Hoklid, the wiry 31-year-old with eyes like steel. Sergeant Hans Storhog, 27, cursing softly as he wrestles his gear. Sergeant Frederick Kaiser, 24, young and eager, shaking off the impact. Second Lieutenant Casper Eidland, 24, scanning the horizon for any sign of Luftwaffe patrols. They're miles off target, blown by the storm. No landmarks, just howling wind and visibility down to arm's length. You can almost feel the freezing gale clawing at your face, the isolation wrapping around like a shroud. They gather quickly, whispering in Norwegian accents thickened by tension. Equipment check, Ronneberg orders, his voice cutting through the storm. Rifles, explosives, rations, everything strapped to their backs or skis. They're Kompanie-Ling, SOE-trained elites, but here, they're ghosts in the snow. Hoklid adjusts his Sten gun, fingers numb. The Swallow team is out there somewhere. We find them, or we freeze. Stromsheim nods, rigging a makeshift sled for the heavier crates. The mission, sabotage the Vemork heavy water plant, Hitler's key to an atomic nightmare. But first, survive this hellish drop zone. They push off on skis, carving through drifts that shift like living things. The plateau is unforgiving, crevasses hidden under thin crusts, winds that could strip a man bare. Hours pass in silence, broken only by labored breaths and the crunch of snow. Eidland spots a faint light, a hallucination? No, a signal. But it's gone. Doubt creeps in. Kaiser stumbles, face planting into ice that cuts his cheek. Blood freezes instantly. Keep moving, Ronneberg urges, pulling him up. The storm intensifies, visibility zero. They're blind, exhausted, but driven by the weight of what failure means, a Nazi bomb that could end the war in fire. Dawn breaks gray and merciless, revealing a landscape of endless white. They've covered miles, but the wrong ones. Stromsheim points to a distant ridge, possible shelter. They hunker in a snow cave, sharing meager chocolate rations, bodies pressed for warmth. Whispers of home, families under occupation, the fjords they left behind. Hoklid sharpens his knife, eyes distant. Remember freshmen, he mutters. The failed glider mission months ago, dozens dead or captured, tortured for secrets they didn't spill. This time, no mistakes. As night falls again, they ski onward, the cold sapping strength with every stride. Storhog's compass spins wildly in the magnetic interference. Are they lost? Then, a break in the clouds, stars wink mockingly. Ronneberg recalculates. Southwest. We push through. But the blizzard returns with vengeance, burying tracks, erasing hope. Exhaustion sets in, visions of warm cabins taunt them. Kaiser collapses briefly, revived by slaps and curses. They can't stop. Not now. Deep into the second night, a shape emerges, a hut, buried in snow. They burst in, rifles ready. Empty. Relief floods them as they light a fire, melting snow for water. Maps unfurl under flickering light. They're 50 kilometers off course. Hokulid laughs bitterly. The gods are testing us. But Ronneberg's face hardens. We find Swallow, or the mission dies here. They rest fitfully, dreams haunted by Gestapo shadows. Days blur into a grueling march. Reindeer tracks lead to a kill, Storhog's shot fells one, raw meat a lifeline. Blood on snow, steam rising. They eat like wolves, strength returning. Idland scouts ahead, spotting ski trails, not theirs. Friends or foes? Tension builds as they follow, weapons cocked. A voice calls out in Norwegian, "Halt!" Codeword? Ronneberg responds, 3 pink elephants. Laughter echoes. It's Swallow, the 4-man advance team, Arne Kjelstrup, Jens Anton Poulsen, Klaus Helberg, Knut Hogland. Embraces in the snow, tales exchanged. Swallow's been surviving on moss and reindeer since October, radioing intel through blizzards. United now, 10 strong, they plot in the hut's dim glow. Vemork looms 30 kilometers away, guarded, fortified, perched on a gorge. The heavy water cells hum inside, fueling Hitler's bomb dreams. But as they sharpen plans, a radio crackles, German patrols closing in. Have they been spotted? The storm outside rages, but inside, resolve steals. Tomorrow, they move. But what if the Nazis strike first? The 10 men crouch inside the cramped mountain hut, shoulders touching, breath clouding the air like smoke. A single candle flickers on an upturned crate, throwing long shadows across faces carved by wind and hunger. Outside, the blizzard has finally eased into an eerie stillness, the kind that makes every snap of a twig sound like a rifle bolt. Ronneberg spreads the hand-drawn map of Vemork across the rough floorboards. Pencil lines trace the gorge, the single suspension bridge, the pipe bridge high above the roaring Mana River. The heavy water cells, those 18 gleaming cylinders, are buried deep inside the concrete fortress, guarded by 200 German troops, searchlights, machine gun nests, and the ever-present threat of avalanche charges wired to blow the approaches. Poulsen, leader of Swallow, traces the route they've scouted over months of starvation and frostbite. The Germans expect an attack from the valley floor, he says quietly. They've mined the roads, posted sentries every 50 meters. But the western cliff, he taps a near-vertical line on the map. Almost sheer, 200 meters straight up from the river. They think no one is mad enough to climb it in winter. Hokulid gives a thin smile. Then we'll be the mad ones. Ronneberg studies the faces around him. Stromsheim, calm and methodical, already calculating demolition charges. Kaiser, the youngest, eyes bright with nervous energy. Idland, sketching guard patterns from memory. Helberg, the skier who once outran a patrol for 30 kilometers on one ski. Hogland, the radio operator whose fingers still tremble from nights spent keying Morse in sub-zero temperatures. These are not strangers, they are brothers forged in the same crucible of occupation and exile. They rehearse the plan until the candle gutters low. 9 men will make the assault, Ronneberg leads the demolition party of 5, while the other 4 provide cover and diversion. Timing is everything, they must reach the plant before the night shift change at 0030 hours, slip past the guards during the brief window when the new shift is still bleary-eyed and the old one is tired. Explosives, plastic, fuses, detonators, are divided and repacked into rucksacks. Each man carries his own death warrant. If captured, cyanide capsules hang around their necks on thin cord. No one speaks of it. At 2000 hours they step outside. The moon has risen, a cold silver disk bathing the plateau in ghostly light. Skis hiss across fresh powder as they descend toward the Rjukan Valley. The temperature drops to -30. Frost forms instantly on eyelashes, breathing hurts. They move in single file, silent except for the soft click of bindings and the occasional curse when a ski catches. Hokulid brings up the rear, sweeping tracks with a pine branch. If the Germans find any sign of their passage, the entire operation collapses. 3 hours later they reach the lip of the gorge. Below, the Mana River roars black and furious between ice shelves, spray freezing mid-air into glittering clouds. The western cliff looms opposite, smooth granite streaked with ice, offering almost no handholds. Ronneberg peers over the edge. We rope down here. One at a time. No lights. Stromsheim rigs the ropes, testing each knot with steady hands. The first man, Kaiser, clips in, lowers himself over the edge, and disappears into shadow. Minutes crawl. A pebble clatters far below. Then a soft whistle, clear. One by one they descend, hearts hammering against ribs. Eidlund slips once, boots scraping granite, rope burning through gloves. He catches himself, hangs gasping, then continues. When the last man touches river ice, they huddle beneath an overhang, listening. Only the river answers. No alarms. No dogs. They move upstream along the narrow bank, boots crunching frozen spray, staying in the moon shadow of the cliff. At 23:30 they reach the base of the pipe bridge, a dizzying lattice of steel girders stretching 400 meters across the gorge, carrying high-pressure water to the turbines. The plant itself sits on the far side, lights blazing against the night, chimneys exhaling pale steam. Searchlights sweep in slow arcs. German sentries pace the bridge deck, collars turned up against the cold, MP-40s slung low. Ronneberg signals, wait. They watch for 20 agonizing minutes. The sentries pass each other every 7 minutes, 7 minutes of blind spot in the middle of the bridge. That's our window, Ronneberg whispers. We cross in 2 groups. Fast. No sound. Stromsheim nods, already calculating angles of fire if it goes wrong. At 0015 the sentries meet at the far end and turn back. Ronneberg sprints first, crouched low, boots silent on the steel grating. The others follow in pairs, hearts in throats, wind whipping at their white suits. Halfway across, a searchlight beam swings toward them, slow, deliberate. They freeze flat against the girders, faces pressed to cold metal. The beam passes inches above their heads, moves on. Breath explodes out of them. They finish the crossing in a silent rush and melt into the shadows of the penstocks, massive steel pipes snaking up the hillside. Now the final approach, a steep snow slope to the basement door. They crawl upward on bellies, ice axes biting into crust. At the top they find the door, unlocked, as Poulsen had promised from months of observation. Inside, warmth hits them like a blow, the hum of machinery, the faint chemical smell of heavy water. They slip down concrete stairs, boots muffled on metal treads. They reach the heavy water room. There they are, the 18 stainless steel cells, each taller than a man, quietly concentrating deuterium for the Reich's atomic dreams. Ronneberg feels the weight of history settle on his shoulders. 400 kilograms of heavy water inside, enough, the scientists say, to push Germany months, maybe years, closer to a bomb. He glances at his team. Faces set, eyes hard. They place the charges, 8 kilos of plastic explosive wired to 2-minute pencil fuses. Stromsheim sets the timers with surgical calm. Ready, he says. Ronneberg looks at each man once more. Then he nods. They light the fuses. Sparks hiss in the dim light. Now they have 2 minutes to get out, or become part of the rubble. The pencil fuses spit tiny sparks that race along the black cord like living things. 2 minutes. 120 seconds. Ronneberg counts them in his head as the team sprints back the way they came, up the narrow stairwell, boots pounding concrete, echoes bouncing off the walls. Behind them, the heavy water cells stand silent witnesses, their stainless steel reflecting the faint glow of emergency lights. No alarm yet. The Germans upstairs are still drinking coffee, playing cards, oblivious. They burst through the basement door into the biting night. Moonlight silverplates the snow. Searchlights still sweep lazy arcs across the yard. The 9 commandos drop flat against the frozen ground beside the penstocks, hearts slamming so hard it feels like they might crack ribs. Stromsheim whispers the countdown, 60, 50, 40. A German sentry rounds the corner of the electrolysis building, cigarette glowing orange in the dark. He pauses, sniffs the air, perhaps he smells the faint cordite already drifting from below. The man shrugs, stubs the cigarette under his boot, and continues his patrol. The team exhales as one. 30 seconds. They crawl backward down the snow slope toward the pipe bridge, moving in perfect silence. Every scrape of cloth on ice sounds thunderous in their own ears. At the lip of the gorge they pause. Below, the manna roars on, indifferent. Above, the plant glows like a fortress carved from light. Then it happens. A muffled whump rolls out from inside the building, deep, almost gentle at first. Then the second charge detonates, sharper, angrier. A third follows, and a fourth in quick succession. Orange fire blooms behind the frosted windows of the heavy water hall. Glass shatters somewhere high up. A siren begins to wail, slow at first, then rising to a piercing scream that splits the night. Ronneberg doesn't wait to admire the work. Bridge. Now. They sprint across the suspension bridge in a single desperate file. Searchlights snap toward the explosion, beams slicing the darkness like knives. A machine gun opens up from a guard tower, wild, unaimed burst stitching the air above their heads. Bullets ping off steel girders, spark against ice. The team keeps low, legs pumping, breath ragged. Halfway across, a searchlight pins them. White light blinds. A voice shouts in German, "Halt! WWII?" Kaiser fires a short burst from his stand, 3 rounds, tight group. The spotlight shatters in a shower of glass and sparks. Darkness returns. They reach the far side and plunge into the shadow of the cliff. Below them, chaos erupts at Vemork. Floodlights snap on. Alarms howl. Soldiers spill from barracks, half-dressed, buckling belts, shouting orders. Dogs bark. A flare arcs into the sky, bursting white and merciless overhead. The entire valley lights up like noon. The commandos drop over the cliff edge one after another, ropes already rigged. They rappel down the sheer face faster than they climbed, boots scraping granite, hands burning through gloves, ropes singing through carabiners. Eidland goes first, then Storhog, then Stromsheim. When Ronneberg's boots hit river ice, he looks up. The plant is burning now, flames licking out of shattered windows, black smoke pouring into the moonlit sky. Secondary explosions ripple through the building as compressed gas lines rupture. The heavy water is gone, destroyed, contaminated, useless to the Reich. But the Germans are reacting. A spotlight finds the cliff face. Bullets snap past, whining off rock. Chips of granite sting exposed skin. Hockelid, last man down, cuts the rope behind him. It whips away into the darkness. No way back up. No way for the Germans to follow quickly. They run. Along the frozen riverbank, leaping ice shelves, splashing through shallows that freeze instantly on their trousers. The flare dies. Another rises. They keep to the shadows, zigzagging between boulders. Behind them, pursuit begins, boots on snow, dogs baying, flashlight beams stabbing through the gorge. A German voice crackles over a megaphone, "Surrender or we shoot to kill." They don't stop. They climb out of the gorge on the eastern side, less steep here, but treacherous with fresh powder sliding underfoot. Haugland slips, slides 10 meters, catches himself on an outcrop. Hellberg hauls him up without a word. At the top they pause for the first time, chests heaving, lungs burning with cold air. Below, Vemork burns like a beacon. Sirens still wail. Trucks growl to life on the valley road. The hunt is on. Ronneberg turns to his men. Faces streaked with soot and sweat despite the cold. Eyes bright with something fiercer than fear, pride, perhaps, or simply the knowledge that they have struck a blow the Nazis will feel for years. "We split now," he says. 3 groups. Different routes. Rendezvous at the Swedish border if we can. No one gets caught alive. They clasp forearms, quick and hard. No long goodbyes. Words would only slow them. Gelstrup, Poulsen, and Helberg peel off first, heading north toward the Skardola Ridge, where Swallow had cached supplies months earlier. Haugland and Haukelid strike east, toward the high plateaus. The demolition team, Ronneberg, Stromsheim, Storhaug, Kaiser, and Eidland, head south, deeper into the wilderness, aiming for the vast emptiness of Hardangervidda where pursuit will bleed out. As they ski into the night, the burning plant shrinks behind them, a fading orange glow against the black horizon. Somewhere in Berlin, Albert Speer will soon receive the coded teletype, Vemork sabotaged. Heavy water production halted. Months, perhaps years, lost. But for now, the 10 Norwegians are still running, ghosts on skis, carrying the weight of what they have done and the even heavier knowledge of what will happen if they fail to disappear. The Germans are closing. Dogs have their scent. A blizzard is forecast by dawn. Will the storm hide them, or bury them? Dawn breaks pale and merciless over Hardangervidda. The plateau stretches flat and featureless for hundreds of kilometers, an ocean of snow under a sky the color of lead. The 5-man demolition team, Ronneberg, Stromsheim, Storhaug, Kaiser, and Eidland, ski south in a tight wedge, packs heavy with the last of their rations, skis creaking under the weight. Behind them, the glow of Vemork has faded to a distant smudge on the horizon. Ahead, nothing but white. No trees. No landmarks. Just wind that cuts through layers of wool and fur like a blade. They've been moving for 48 hours with only brief halts to melt snow in tin mugs over a tiny Primus stove. The cold is a living thing now, seeping into bones, slowing blood, dulling thoughts. Frostbite blackens Kaiser's fingertips, he wraps them tighter in spare socks and keeps going. Eidland's eyes are red-rimmed from staring at endless glare, he ties a strip of cloth across them like a blindfold, navigating by feel and memory. Stromsheim, ever the steady one, leads the pace, slow, relentless, never faltering. They speak little. Words cost breath, and breath is precious. When they do talk, it's in low murmurs about the Germans. Patrols are out, Luftwaffe spotter planes drone overhead at intervals, engines fading in and out like distant thunder. Dogs have their scent from the gorge. Every few hours a flare pops in the distance, or a rifle shot echoes across the ice. The hunters are closing. On the third day the blizzard returns with fury. Visibility drops to meters. Snow whips horizontally, stinging exposed skin until it bleeds. They link arms with rope to stay together, skis buried to the bindings. Ronneberg takes point, compass in gloved hand, counting paces. 1,000. 2,000. The wind howls so loud it drowns thought. You can almost feel the storm pressing down, trying to grind them into the snow. They dig a snow cave at nightfall, shovels scraping, bodies pressed close for warmth. Inside, the temperature hovers just above freezing. They share a single sleeping bag, passing it like a ritual. Kaiser shivers uncontrollably, Stromsheim rubs his back until circulation returns. Stories drift out in the dark, memories of Oslo before the war, of mothers who still believe their sons are safe in England. Ronneberg speaks of his younger brother, still fighting with the resistance. We do this for them, he says quietly. So they never see what the Nazis would bring. Dawn brings no relief. The storm has passed, but the sky is low and threatening. They break camp, skis hissing again. By noon they spot tracks, not reindeer, but human. Fresh. German ski patrol. The team freezes, drops into a drift. Minutes later, 6 soldiers glide past 20 meters away, dogs straining at leashes. One man pauses, sniffs the air, then shakes his head and moves on. The Norwegians wait until the patrol vanishes, then push harder. The days blur. They eat reindeer moss scraped from rocks, chew snow for water. Exhaustion turns legs to lead. Eidland hallucinates a cabin, warm light in windows, only to find empty snow. Kaiser collapses once, face down in powder, they haul him up, slap him awake, keep moving. At night they hear wolves howl, closer each time. Hunger gnaws deeper. On the 7th day they reach a frozen lake. Across it, perhaps 30 kilometers, lies the Swedish border, safety, if they can make it. But the ice is thin in places, cracked by wind. They test each step with ski poles, inching forward. Halfway across, a crack splits the silence, ice groaning under weight. They freeze. The crack widens. Water black as ink bubbles up. Stromsheim whispers, spread out. Slow. They crawl on bellies, distributing weight, hearts in throats. A meter at a time. When the far shore finally rises under their skis, they collapse in silence, too spent for joy. But the Germans are still out there. That night, as they huddle in another cave, a plane circles low overhead, engine roar shaking snow from the roof. Searchlights stab down, sweeping the plateau. The team presses flat against the wall, breath held. The plane banks away. Gone. For now. They push on. 12 days total. 1,400 kilometers of ski tracks behind them. Rations gone. Strength gone. But will gone too. On the morning of February 28, 1943, they crest a low ridge and see it, the Swedish flag fluttering above a border post, red and blue against white snow. Guards in neutral uniforms watch them approach, rifles lowered. Ronneberg stops, turns to his men. Faces gaunt, beards frozen, eyes hollow, but alive. They clasp hands one last time. No words needed. They cross the line. Sweden. Freedom. Behind them, the plateau lies empty and silent. The Germans will search for weeks, find nothing but tracks that fade into nothing. In Berlin, the High Command will rage, heavy water lost, the bomb delayed, perhaps forever. But for the 5 Norwegians, the war isn't over. They still have to get home. And somewhere on the plateau, Knut Haukelid remains behind, alone, with a final task. April 1943. The snow on Hardangervidda has begun to soften under the first hesitant sun of spring. Meltwater trickles in thin silver threads between rocks, patches of lichen begin to show green beneath the thinning white. But high on the plateau, one man remains. Knut Haukelid moves alone now. The others, Ronneberg and his demolition team, are already safe in Sweden, then on to Britain, their story whispered in intelligence briefings and SOE war rooms. The Swallow Group has scattered too, some to Sweden, some deeper into the resistance network. Haukelid, however, stayed behind. He volunteered. There was unfinished business. The Germans have not given up. Vemork is still smoldering in their minds. They have rebuilt what they could, fresh shipments of heavy water are being prepared for transport to Germany, by rail to the coast, then by ferry across Lake Tinn to the waiting train at Tinneset. The cargo, 14 canisters containing the last 165 kilograms of Norwegian heavy water, the Reich's final hope to salvage the atomic program. If that shipment reaches Berlin, the setback becomes only a delay. Haukelid knows the schedule. He has watched from the ridges for weeks, binoculars pressed to frost-cracked eyes, notebook filled with times, guard counts, ferry names. The Hydro, a 493-ton steamer, will carry the precious load on the night of February 20th. One chance. One night. One man. He skis down to the lake under cover of darkness, white suit blending with moonlit snow. The Hydro lies at the dock in Rjukan, loading crates under floodlights. German sentries pace the gangplank, Norwegian dockworkers move slowly, deliberately, eyes averted. Haukelid waits in the pines above the waterline until the last crate disappears below decks. Then he waits longer, until the sentries change shift, until the floodlights dim, until the only sound is the lap of black water against hull. He moves like a shadow. Down the slope, across open ice, heart loud enough to wake the town. He reaches the ferry's stern, finds the small service hatch used for coaling. It is locked, but the lock is old, rusted by lake spray. A few quiet strokes with a file, and it gives. He slips inside. The engine room is warm, oily, humming with the low throb of idling boilers. Coal dust coats every surface. Hocklid moves carefully, avoiding the sleeping firemen curled on benches. He finds the watertight doors leading to the cargo hold. Another lock picked. Inside, the 14 aluminum canisters sit strapped to wooden pallets, stenciled with warnings in German: Schweres Wasser, Hochkonzentriert, Lebensgefahr. He works fast. Plastic explosive, 4 charges, each the size of a brick, placed low along the hull plates, just above the waterline. Pencil fuses set for 10 minutes after departure. He wires them in parallel. If one fails, the others will still detonate. No room for error. As he finishes, footsteps echo on the deck above. A guard making rounds. Hocklid flattens against a bulkhead, breath held. The footsteps pause, then retreat. He exhales, slips back through the hatch, relocks it as best he can, and melts into the night. The next morning he watches from a ridge 5 kilometers away. The hydro casts off at 1,000 hours sharp, smoke curling from her single stack, wake spreading across the still lake like spilled ink. She steams slowly, 8 knots, toward the far shore, 30 kilometers away. Hocklid counts the minutes in silence. The fuses should ignite at 1100. At 11:05, nothing. At 11:10, still nothing. Doubt claws at him. Did the charges fail in the damp? Did a guard find them? Then, at 11:15, a flash. Small at first, almost lost in the glare off the water. Then the sound reaches him, a deep, rolling boom that echoes off the mountainsides like artillery. The hydro lifts slightly at the bow, then settles. Black smoke pours from midships. She lists hard to starboard within seconds. Screams carry across the water, faint, terrible. Lifeboats drop unevenly, some capsize in the panic. The ferry rolls further, funnels dipping toward the lake. At 11:30 she disappears bow-first in a boil of white foam and escaping steam. Only the mast tips remain above the surface, then they too vanish. The lake claims everything. Of the 14 canisters, 13 sink to the bottom in 430 meters of water, too deep, too cold for recovery. The Germans will later dredge for weeks and find nothing usable. The last of Norway's heavy water is gone forever. Hocklid watches until the smoke clears and the lake lies flat again. Then he turns his skis north, toward Sweden. No triumph in his stride, only the quiet certainty of a job finished. Behind him, the war continues. In Berlin, Heisenberg will receive the news and feel the first real crack in the illusion of inevitability. Across the channel, Allied scientists will breathe easier, knowing the race has tilted. In occupied Norway, families will whisper the names of the men who never came home, yet whose shadows still stretch long across history. And somewhere beneath Lake Tin, 14 canisters rest in darkness, silent witnesses to the night 10 Norwegians turned the tide. Type continue to generate the next section, or say END if this concludes the story for you. May 1945. The war in Europe is ending in rubble and silence. Berlin lies in smoking ruin. The Reich that dreamed of splitting atoms now splits at the seams. In the Allied occupation zones, intelligence teams sift through captured documents, interrogating physicists who once walked the corridors of power. One name surfaces again and again in the secret files: Vemork. The heavy water sabotage. The Norwegian Commandos who turned possibility into impossibility. In a quiet room at the British Embassy in Stockholm, Joachim Ronneberg sits across from a bespectacled SOE officer. The war is over for him now, officially. He has been debriefed, decorated, sent home to a Norway slowly healing from 5 years of occupation. Yet the questions keep coming. How did 10 men, dropped blind into a blizzard, walk out alive? How did one man sink an entire shipment beneath a frozen lake? Ronneberg answers calmly, precisely, the way he always did: facts first, emotion second. But when the officer asks about the cost, what it felt like to know the mission might have doomed them all, Ronneberg pauses. For the first time in years, he allows himself to remember the cold that burned, the hunger that clawed, the moment the fuses were lit and there was no going back. You don't think about winning, he says at last. You think about not losing. Not for yourself. For the children who would have grown up under a different flag. Across the Atlantic, in Los Alamos, J. Robert Oppenheimer receives the final intelligence summary on the German nuclear program. The report is brief. Production of heavy water effectively ceased after February 1943. No realistic path to a bomb before 1945. The race was never close. He sets the paper down, lights another cigarette, and stares out at the New Mexico desert. History will remember Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It will rarely remember the Norwegian plateau, the burning plant, the sunken ferry. But Oppenheimer knows. Without Vemork, the timeline shifts. The bomb might have been theirs first. In Rjukan today, the old plant still stands, repurposed, quieter. Tourists walk the suspension bridge where commandos once sprinted under fire. A small museum preserves photographs, young men in white camouflage, skis strapped to packs, eyes steady beneath frost-rimmed hoods. Schoolchildren read their names aloud: Ronneberg, Hockelid, Stromsheim, Poulsen, Helberg, Hogland, Gelstrup, Storhog, Kaiser, Eidland, and try to imagine what it was like to be 20-something and carry the weight of the world on frozen shoulders. Knut Hockelid never spoke much about that night on the hydro. He returned to Norway after the war, worked quietly as an engineer, raised a family. When journalists pressed him in later years, he would shrug and say, "We did what had to be done." But once, in a rare interview, he allowed himself a small confession: "I still hear the explosion sometimes. Not loud. Just, final. Like a door closing on something that should never have opened." Joachim Ronneberg lived to be 99. In his last public appearance, frail but straight-backed, he stood before a crowd in Oslo and said simply, "We were not heroes. We were Norwegians who refused to let our country be used as a weapon against humanity." The audience rose in silence. No applause. Just the weight of gratitude hanging in the air. The heavy water cells that survived the initial blast, those few not shattered, were later recovered from the ruins. Some ended up in Allied hands, used in reactors that helped power the very bombs that ended the war in the Pacific. Irony, bitter and complete. Yet the real legacy lies not in isotopes or chain reactions. It lies in the choice made by 10 men in the dead of winter, to act when inaction would have been safer, to risk everything when the odds mocked them, to strike in darkness so others might live in light. Today the Hardangervidda Plateau is still vast, still silent. Ski tracks fade within hours. Blizzards still howl. But if you stand on the right ridge at the right hour, when the wind drops and the light turns gold, you can almost hear them, faint, rhythmic, the hiss of skis on snow, moving south toward a border they refuse to let close. 10 shadows, gliding into history. And somewhere beneath Lake Tin, in 430 meters of cold black water, 14 canisters rest undisturbed. They will remain there. Forever.